Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Dja Dja Wurrung people, whose country we are on today, and given it's fitting that we are a performing arts organisation and in a performing arts venue, to acknowledge that they are the original performing artists on this land and have told their stories through performing arts and song and dance for millennia. So that's very appropriate, and we extend our respects to them. My name's Carolyn Stanford. I'm the chair of the Ulumbarra Foundation. I know many people here today, which is fantastic, and some new faces that I don't. I'd like to acknowledge our board members that are in the room with me. If you can just stand up and wave. Sorry, it's very awkward, but just so that you know who to go along and talk to afterwards. Margaret Keach, who's leaping out of her seat. Robin Bragg, where's Robin? Oh, up the back. And also to Vicky Pearce, who's right in front of me. Thanks, everyone. I'd like to also welcome our founding patron, the Honourable Howard Nathan, who's sitting here, and we will hear from him soon. And I'd like to acknowledge our other donors and supporters who are here in the room with us today, and also representatives of our corporate partners who so generously agreed to sit up on the stage, looking very awkward right at the minute until I join them, but who are going to share their wisdom and expertise with us. So Brett and Nathan, thanks very much. So we're here to talk about a topic that's deeply personal and powerful, and how we can leave a lasting legacy in our communities through charitable bequests. I'd also like to make a special announcement today. I'm proud to launch the Ulumbarra Foundation's Legacy Circle. This is our way of recognising those who have confirmed a bequest to the Foundation, and those Legacy Circle members will receive VIP invitations to events, rehearsals, behind-the-scenes conversations, and special gatherings that offer a closer connection to the work that our bequest stores make possible. So we've brought together our panel to guide us through the legal, financial and personal aspects of making a bequest. So let me just introduce them to you. Nathan Scott. He is the Director of Beck Legal, and he specialises in commercial and succession planning and is an expert in estate planning and wills. Thanks, Nathan. And Brett Marchant, who is a partner and senior financial planner at Strategem. So he helps individuals think strategically about their giving within their broader financial goals. Now, he tells me he's not an accountant, so don't ask him any very hard accounting questions, financial planning only. Brett's son Tom is a talented young actor, and we've probably all had the benefit of seeing him on the stages here. And he participated in the Ulumbarra Foundation's mentoring program, which is lovely. And last but certainly not least, the Honourable Howard Nathan, AMKC, founding patron of the Ulumbarra Foundation, who will share his story with us in a minute. So today we're going to be sharing some general advice. If you'd like a confidential conversation, please talk to our guests and our board members afterwards and enjoy some refreshments after we're finished with the formal part. So let's dive in. I'd like you to join me in welcoming our patron, the Honourable Howard Nathan, who will say a few words. Welcome, Howard.
Everybody around here is in a fit state to make substantial bequests to relatives. Now, I thought that I would start with the Bendigo story. As you probably know, I look after members of my community and so on. And we had a wonderful funeral the other day, absolutely terrific. And I sort of conducted it and did the right things and so on, and the correct incantations. And as you know, it's the custom for the senior surviving relative to throw the first clods onto the coffin in the pit. Well, we get to that bit, and I've got the widow on one arm, and I've got the surviving senior daughter on the other arm, and I get to the bit, and I think I'm doing pretty well, you see. And all of a sudden, a clod of earth comes flying over the top of us all and goes plonk into the grave. Oh, well, we thought somebody doesn't know the customs. so I pretended it hadn't happened. We're walking out from the cemetery over White Hills, and I've got the widow and one, and this stunning lady appeared, quite young. She was perhaps 70. Quite young, no, she was a wee virgin of about 60, I suspect. Bazinga's out here, I can't tell you. Oh. And she came up and she said to the surviving widow, "Darling, I'm so glad you could come to Father's funeral." I've never seen her before in my life. So I'm going to talk substantially about predatory relatives and will making. There have been enormous changes to the law of succession in my lifetime, and you will hear that the bloodline is not necessarily definitive, and therefore people who have, under the present legislation, who have a moral claim, a moral right, the person who's looked after Uncle Fred for 20 years or something or other, the person who's been solid and caring and so on, perhaps no relative at all, and has developed a degree of dependency upon the person who's doing the right thing and dying, may well be able to lurch out of the closet and make a claim. And that's morally sensible and morally to be defended. And I might tell you another Bendigo story. You know I do good works and worthy deeds at the hospital. And maybe you don't. If you see me around, they all think, "Oh, I'm full of high jump, you know, is he? He's visiting before I get there." And I've got a customer. We have a system of chaplains, as they're called. It's the most incongruous position I've ever held as a chaplain. Anyway, off I go. And one of my customers is doing the right thing and dying. A vile person, absolutely dreadful. And I look up the manual and it says, in the event of impending death, you must notify the family no matter how estranged. I'll read this a little more. What I do is I eventually get the name of the brother. So I phone up the brother and say, "I'm da-da-da-da, and I regret to tell you that your brother is terminally ill. There's no prospect of recovery, and it's a matter of days, not weeks." Silence at the other end of the phone. I thought, "Oh, I've been too brutal. I've been too assertive. Must be." And over the phone comes the immortal phrase, "Bloody wonderful!" So there can be humour in the prospect of crossing over or whatever else it may be called. And I'm going to, as I say, limit my terms to the predatory relatives. Now, the days that simply being of the blood have gone. The key notion in the law of succession now is a state of dependency. And that can arise, the state of dependency, not only out of physical caring and so on, but out of emotional support, out of being around when it's necessary, out of being kindly when it's necessary. And the persons who do that can assert now under the law of succession a moral claim. I'm dependent and was partially dependent upon the deceased, and the deceased was certainly partially and emotionally dependent upon me. And if I can establish, and that may be the lady next door who's, been making the beetroot soup or whatever other ghastly thing that, can happen with it. with following the CWA recipe book. You can therefore find that the scope of potential claimants in relation to an estate is much, much wider than you initially anticipated. Therefore, it is now very much a minefield, particularly in relation to superannuation, and I won't talk about that because somebody else will. But much of our wealth is now tied up in super schemes, accumulative schemes or pension schemes, one way or the other. And very often, looking around here, people's major repository of wealth is in the super scheme, in your various personal super schemes, or they may well be elsewhere. And it's very important to get those schemes and your view of them under your belt fairly promptly. Now, more will be spoken about that by the other people here. But such has been the change in the structure of our society that there are repositories of wealth and income that were never envisaged before. Likewise, silly me, when I was a young barrister, go anywhere, do anything for a quid, I thought, oh, I've got to provide for my old age. So I purchased antiques. Well, you think I was talking about the last dog in the dog, absolutely valueless now. What I thought was my repository of wealth has disappeared. Can't even be sold. I've got a silver collection, scrabbled around and saved, when I think of it, to buy some English Georgian silver spoons. What bloody hell did I do that for? You just can't move them on. So that traditional repositories of wealth, silver, antiques, artworks, well, you've got to face it, some of those are all but valueless. You might think that, you've got Uncle Fred's painting on the wall, and after all, he did get the Nobel Prize. He did get one of the major art prizes, and you might think, oh, that'll be worth a few shekels. May not be. I've got a few paintings by Clifton Pugh. Well, as you know, he fornicated with every stray woman that moved across the farm. I wasn't too sure about the cattle either. And he, dreadful, be everywhere, root anything. He was just the most appalling person. Well, I've got a couple of his paintings. Would you like one? I'm offering a slightly pre-loved. So that what you may think is valuable may well not be. Traditional sources of looking after your wealth in terms of furniture, silver, artworks and so on have all but disappeared. So therefore, your super schemes and where there is actually money involved are very probably the major sources of your wealth to be disposed of or to be transferred. Now, another legal story. Can I tell a legal story?
If you want to.
Social worker.
Stop you, so you that's okay.
There was a time when a woman who'd been perhaps en suite with a fellow for some time or a partner, and she needed, or he needed, to construct a trust. I'll come to a bit about trusts in a minute. A trust that there was an indication that there would be a transfer of half the estate or whatever it may have been. There were many, many cases in succession law dealing with trusts and constructive trusts. That is where the person who's seeking to establish the trust said, well, although nothing was written down, it was an understanding that I would pass over half the wealth to Fred or Eloise or whoever it might have been. So there was a whole raft of litigation about constructing a trust. And I was dealing with one of them, and the little old lady said, I wouldn't have gone to live with him unless he had indicated to me that he was going to transfer half his wealth to me. Well, smart-ass me scoffed from the bench, and the little old lady had her daughter with her. And the daughter that night went to her local GP and she said, look, I've got to shoot the judge tomorrow because he's not finding much favour with us, and I'm a bit agitated, could you prescribe me some Valium? So the GP did. And the next morning, I was about to come into court to continue this case. This is kosher, this story. I mean, I don't have to build this one up. This one clear. And so I'm about to go into the courtroom, a fetching wig and all that paraphernalia, which is now gone, thank heavens. And the copper said, you can't come in. I said, don't you bloody well tell me, come in and say, don't come in. So I didn't. And the coppers searched that girl, the daughter, and there in her purse was the pistol, already loaded, cocked and ready to go. Wow. Now I've had a few murder attempts, as you probably know, but that was another one where by the sheerest chance and much belatedly, the GP had let the coppers know that she did see was making threats to kill, and that was in the way. So, I suppose I'm very lucky to be here. Have I got 2 more minutes or not?
2 only.
Could you imagine? Let me tell you that she's lethal. This Carolyn has
You're going to
been.
sit next to me in a minute.
You don't worry, she's disposed of several on her. I should be coming back to the topic. I find there's much more yiggis pleasure in giving while you're still around. And you should really think of substantial benefactions to existing trusts. Now, there's a lot in Bendigo, but the Ulumbarra is the better trust because it's in perpetuity and it's not named in respect of any family. Now, there are marvellous family trusts in Bendigo. There's Ryle, there's Abbott, there's Mackay, many of them who operate through trustee companies. A tubal ligation if it goes family trust, unless you've got, mega millions, 100 million or something like that. I'm talking about you, Cookie. If you've got something like that, then it's a different gameplay to somebody with, say, 10 million or less. 10 million or less is a threshold where you've got to dispose of it in a relatively short time after death. Because if it dribbles on and dribbles on, like some of the stuff that's managed by equity trustees or was managed by equity trustees, it just goes into a porridge. That's no good. Get some focus. I can't think what's the in English. Praise or get some recognition while you're around, and it'll be a joy for you and it's a joy for the family. Longer term notions of leaving trusts, unless you've got mega bucks like my family and who are going to give millions to the art gallery, unless you've got mega wealth, it's better to do it with a time frame at least 10 or 15 years, proposal after death, and then it's gone. That's enough.
So I'd like to start a little bit by setting the scene and ask some questions. So Nathan, first question to you. Could you explain in simple terms what a bequest is and why it's important to make it legally clear in a will?
Yeah, sure. So what a bequest is it's essentially a gift under a will. So a charitable bequest, which is what we're here to talk about today, is by extension a gift to a charity under your will. So those charitable bequests, they can take a number of different forms. So it can be a fixed percentage of the estate, it can be a fixed amount, it can be a specific asset of the estate. So really, really important that bequest is set out clearly in a will, which is legally valid, just so that you've got that certainty that that bequest is going to take effect. It's binding on your family. You've clearly outlined what your wishes are. So I've got to say a story. I did a will for a man about 3 years ago who had terminal cancer. Now he wanted to leave $30,000 to various cancer charities, but he wanted a simple will. He said, I don't want it in the will, my family will know what I want to do. So I tried to warn him, I tried to say, look, I know, they've probably got the right intentions, but you can't leave it to chance. Anyway, we didn't put it in the will, we decided we're going to leave it to chance with the family, and he passed away, and lo and behold, the beneficiaries, they didn't honour those bequests, unfortunately. So that was $30,000 that various cancer charities that were very close to him missed out on. So we banged our head against the wall for 6 months. We tried to work around it, find out ways we could give effect to those bequests, but unfortunately, because it wasn't in the will, we really didn't have a leg to stand on. So just a really good lesson, I think that come out of that is it needs to go in the will so that it's binding.
Thank you for that. Brett, one for you. How does a bequest fit into overall estate planning?
Well, it's just a component, I guess, at the end of the day. So as a financial planner, when I talk to clients about estate planning, it's all about having a valid will in place, maybe having a power of attorney in place. So if you're not in a position to make decisions, someone else can do that on your behalf under the power of attorney. And at the end of the day, estate planning is all about making sure the right assets go to the right people at the right time. Another important aspect of estate planning too is superannuation, death benefit nominations. So superannuation is a non-estate asset. Okay, so what that means is it doesn't automatically go from, upon your death, it doesn't automatically go from your super fund to the estate. There's a number of different nominations you can make. The best nomination you can look at when it comes to superannuation is called a binding death benefit nomination. So a binding death benefit nomination removes the trustee discretion. So if you pass away, you don't have a death benefit nomination in place on your super fund, the the trustee has discretion where they pay your death benefit. Okay? So for most people, they want to make sure that upon their death, their superannuation fund, as Harold mentioned before, is usually a big part of their overall wealth goes to the right people. So have a binding death benefit nomination in place where you can nominate a spouse, you can nominate children, you can nominate someone else that has given you care over the years. Closer?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So the binding death benefit nomination, that binding death benefit nomination is certainly part of the overall estate planning. So that's something that everyone should be looking at. But again, wills, power of attorney, binding death benefit nomination, but also what happens upon death as well. So for a lot of people, their wealth, they want to transition their wealth to, I guess, family, people that have helped them out, but also charity organisations as well. So my job as a financial planner is to help create wealth, but also to help manage that wealth, and also at the end of the day, minimise the amount of tax clients pay along the journey and at death as well. Because if I ask for a show of hands in this room, is there anyone that likes sending tax to Canberra? No, right? So if we can manage portfolios effectively, tax effectively, while you're alive, but also what happens to the estate in terms of tax as well, well, that's a couple of boxes which are being ticked. And another thing I talk to clients about, and when I start to talk to clients, particularly young clients, about their wealth journey, everyone's journey is different. I always say to them, you've got to do something, right? Because for a lot of people, they don't tend to focus on their financial well-being all that closely, because you get busy in whatever you do, and sometimes months and years go by and you haven't really focused on your future, because at some point you're probably going to retire and the money that you've been earning from employment is going to dry up. So you're going to have to have some wealth there, whether it's in superannuation or outside superannuation, to provide you an income in retirement. But yeah, do something. And that's the case with estate planning as well. I'm thinking about, well, okay, upon my death, this is my estimated wealth. Where am I going to divert that to? And more people are looking to leave a legacy with their money, because, as Nathan just said, sometimes they've got good intentions, but when other people get hold of the money, it goes in other directions. So that's why it's really important just to have a good look at what you've got, where you might want to direct that, not only while you're alive, but also upon death as well.
That's a really good segue into my question for Howard now, which is a personal question. I want to know, and I'm sure everyone else does too, what motivated you to include the Ulumbarra Foundation in your will?
I thought that Bendigo was a terrific place. We moved to Bendigo, and I realised that there's a huge number of welfare support programs which seem to consume pensionability and so on, and it just disappears. So I thought, and I've been very active, I might tell you, in charitable works. I was on the board and Hanover Welfare, which was the United Church charity, and we were looking after, we thought, children at risk of becoming drug addicted. And so we set up, for example, amongst other things, a big house in St Kilda, and we all did our voluntary work and so on, and painted the place and so on. 3 weeks after opening, the coppers came to me and said, "You're going to have to close down." I got all iffy about that. And they said, "Well, look, what's happening is that you've become a safe house and a depot." So we went around the house, this big house in St Kilda, and sure enough, up every flue and up every whatever, hiding place and so on, every room had a stash point. So I came to the view, no more dealing with the poor and the dispossessed, because it's just endless. That then created in my mind a view that if I was going to be charitable, and it's an obligation, moral obligation, then I would give it to where I thought would long-standing effect and in respect of people who are going to make good lives and contributory lives. There was a big moral dilemma. Shut up after this. It was a big moral dilemma for me. Do I meet immediate needs, or do I have a wider horizon? So I chose the wider horizon rather than giving it to the salvos or Jewish care or whatever else that do the immediate things. And I found that more satisfactory. Now, one of my benefactions, which gives me great joy, marries these two aspects. Longer term prospects, immediate relief. And I have a scheme, this is personal, but it's well known, I have a scheme supporting students in need at La Trobe University. Not students who've come top class or succeeded and so on. They can get their scholarships elsewhere. I have a scheme, and the staff all know, they know that lecturing staff, if somebody's a bit short, can't go home and see Dad because there's not enough funds, or they're in danger of dropping out because they can't meet the educational requirements of living away from home and so on. So my scheme for La Trobe students is not those who are succeeding, but those who should be given the chance to succeed. And that consumes perhaps the major part of my benefactions, goes to the La Trobe students on the cusp. And I find that very satisfactory. And they write you nice little notes. That gives you a chuff. And everybody wants a bit of a chuff here and now. You're not going to hear much about it if you know you're 10 feet under or something. So that you asked me why I went to Ulumbarra, why I given to Ulumbarra. When we started off, when Ulumbarra started off with the somewhat sainted Gordon McKern, the idea was to give some depth and security to cultural progress in Bendigo. And I think it's accepted. Ned and I have just come back from Darwin. No need for any of you to go to Darwin. Their idea of symphony orchestra is 3 ukuleles and a washboard. And it's really grim. Now look what's happened in Bendigo. A few bob from Ulumbarra amongst other things, and Bendigo said, wow, tremendous return on your buck. I can see Travis and Huranthi nodding sagely. So that's why I gave to you, given to Ulumbarra. You want to get value for your dollar. You want it to improve somebody's chances or the environment or whatever else it is. And forget that, the desperate need of the poor and dispossessed. You're not going to have the slightest effect on that particular cohort. That's my view, and of course I get castigated about it.
Thank you, Carol. That was lovely. Nathan, next question for you. What's the most common mistake people make when leaving a bequest to a charity?
Yeah, there's a
I think there's a few, I mean, it should be easy, but even solicitors are getting it wrong. So I think if you are leaving a bequest to a charity, you should really be identifying that charity by its legal name in the will. So my personal preference, I like to put the ABN in there as well, also the registered address for the charity, just so that there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion about who you're intending to benefit. And if you jump on most charities' websites, they'll actually give you the suggested wording that you can use in the will, the full legal name. So I don't know how solicitors get it wrong when it's literally on the charity's websites. But you really should be identifying it precisely by that correct legal name. In terms of common mistakes, the ones that I've seen, the obvious one's not having a valid will. So if the will's not valid, well, the bequest then can't take effect. Not properly identifying the charity or using ambiguous language. So I've come across an example where someone said, I leave X amount of dollars to cancer research, and they've capitalised cancer research as if that is a charity. Now, there's no registered charity in Australia that goes by cancer research, and there's about 48 charities that have cancer research in their name. So in that example that I've dealt with, it wasn't clear there who the will maker was actually intending to benefit. Luckily the family all agreed that, look, we'll give the funds to a cancer charity, but if we had a beneficiary or a family member who wanted that money, they could technically say, look, that gift fails, the charities miss out. So really important to be clear, don't use ambiguous language. There's a lot of charities out there too that have multiple branches, so national, state-based, so just need to be very clear what branch are you actually wanting to benefit. The RSPCA is an example. They've got state-based branches, a national branch. Hospitals are a good one. A lot of people will leave, the bequest to the operating arm of the hospital as opposed to the charitable foundation. So you're at risk there of potentially that bequest falling into the operating revenue of the hospital as opposed to being used for charitable purposes. Another big mistake I see is people don't actually have the money in their estate at the time to fund the charitable bequest. So Brett's touched on superannuation, Howard's touched on superannuation. So people might have money, but it might be tied up in other entities like superannuation companies, trusts, and that money might not necessarily be flowing into their estate at the time that they pass away to fund those bequests. So really important with estate planning to work out where are the funds going to come from to fund that bequest. Probably the last main one, there's plenty of examples, but probably the main last one I touch on is I think sometimes people tend to be a little bit too specific or put too many binding conditions around their bequest to charity, and there's always that risk that charities might not be able to satisfy those conditions at the time of receiving the bequest. So, Ulumbarra, for example, might have certain programs on the go at the moment, but in a couple of decades' time, or whenever that gift takes effect, the priorities of Ulumbarra might be a little bit different, the needs might be a little bit different. So if you've put very strict conditions on how that gift is to be used, there is that risk that if the charity at the time can't meet those conditions, that gift could potentially fall over. So, look, there's probably a couple of things that can trip you up, and I think if you get the proper advice at the time, generally you can make sure that you're covered off on those potential risks.
Having some good advice and not just a do-it-yourself kit, perhaps if you're thinking about that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the other point too. There's a lot of do-it-yourself options these days too. Look, they're all right, but there is a lot of technicalities. There's very strict procedures in around signing and witnessing, so it is very easy to get it wrong, and that can potentially impact on that bequest going to a charity.
I guess, you just want to make sure that it's as you intended, because you're not going to be there to really see it through. Brett, how, we sort of touched on, Nathan was sort of saying about, you didn't have the money there at the time. How should someone decide on the type of gift to leave, whether it's like a fixed amount, a percentage, a particular asset, and how do they decide on that? And are some assets more tax efficient to leave to family or charity or vice versa?
I don't think there's any right or wrong answer there. At the end of the day, most clients that I see have got a broad-based portfolio, so cash, shares, property, managed funds, exchange traded funds, these investments which are listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. I guess to answer that question, I guess I probably will lean on some situations that I've seen where someone passes away and the assets, so on date of death, your executor steps up and safeguards your assets, and then they take control of your assets, and then the executor distributes your assets as per your will. So coming back to what Nathan does, drafting good wills is essential. I always say to my clients, go see a solicitor to get your will done. Don't go down to the post office. I was down at the post office yesterday returning something that my wife purchased online. Behind I saw, a will kit, right? I don't know what that cost, but it's worth spending the money with a solicitor to get the estate planning documentation right. But in terms of the assets flow into the estate and then they're distributed as per your will. And it's a case of, do you want to transfer cash to your beneficiaries? And if so, the assets need to be sold in the estate. So capital gains tax is a factor, an issue that we all need to consider when we sell an asset for more than what we purchased it for. Depends when you purchased it, what it's worth, what you bought it for. So capital gains tax is an issue that everyone should be aware of before they transfer an asset or distribute an asset. And lean on your accountant or your tax agent to give you advice about that. But from a state perspective, a beneficiary, again, what I've seen over many years is they like to get cash. It's nice and easy. The executor distributes, sells the assets, gets the cash, and if there's 2 or 3 or 4 beneficiaries, they will get the same amount, and then they can do whatever they want with that money. Whereas if assets such as shares and property are distributed, it's sometimes a bit tough to manage that going forward because the beneficiaries might have different objectives. So yeah, if you're going to distribute assets to family members, as I said, based on what I've seen, usually cash works well. But if you want to give some assets to a charity, cash is always good. I don't think they're going to knock back any cash. But shares and property I've seen as well, going to charity as well. And that also gives the charity an opportunity to manage those assets going forward. And again, depending on the cash flow requirements or the programs which are in place, they might not need to lean on those assets initially, but they might lean on those assets in the years to come. And if that's the case, hopefully we've seen some good earnings or returns from the assets. So effectively, your gift is actually increased in value by the time the charity might need to dispose of it and raise the cash.
That's great, thank you. A will is not a set and forget thing. Sometimes it is, and then it becomes out of date, and it's therefore not reflective of your wishes. And it certainly hasn't been a set and forget for you, Howard. Can you tell us, if you're comfortable, about your personal journey in writing your will and updating it over time?
Oh, yes, you will. First of all, can I just amplify a point already made? It's very foolish to, in a will, specify amounts, $10,000 to whatever else, or Fred or Harry or June or whatever it may be. Always do it by way of a percentage. Because that deal, and make sure you don't give away 120% of your assets and so on, in my view. So that's just a mechanical thing, but worthwhile keeping in mind. Yes, I am satisfied, and I do look at it, the will, every 5 years as a business security, because we're often giving to younger people, and it's your wealth going the current climate, look at your will every 5 years and then, if necessary, recast it. So that being done, you should do it by way of percentage. 10% to Fred, and 5% to Harry, and 2% to somebody else. And state in the will why you're doing it. Now, there is a provision for making testamentary dispositions and testamentary statements. The statements have no binding effect. And inevitably, in most families, if it's anything like mine, there are some deserving, some undeserving, some that you wouldn't give them fourpence, and others that you would like to see, get a kick along. So in my will, I have made testamentary statements as to why certain people are getting nothing. And it's important to sustain that in the will, because it will largely forestall litigation. Now, I have said in my will, there's a certain person who would seem to think that they're entitled to a lot of money. He's actually committed the sin of telling me what he was going to do with my money when I... Yes, well, of course, that is now a big fat zero. And I have stated in my will the reasons why I have given consideration in this testament. That's what the will is called, to X, Y, and Z, and I have formed the view that it is not necessary to provide da. So the scope of a will can be expanded to saying not only what you want to do, but why won't necessarily hold up, because the why question is as at the date of the will, and the things can change, but at least it's a peg which will carry forth your testamentary wishes. Will phraseology now is aimed at all these possibilities. So the possibilities of what you will do and what you might not do should all be stated in the will itself. Now, any lawyer can probably sum up this will. And a lot of them are very motivations. Was disposing of humans, the proposition of the room laws, expression coming from the Americans, you're not hearing it? They're learning methods to do. I'll shut up now. So therefore, in the testament, you can state what you're doing, and you can state what you're not doing, and hope that it has some probative effect, because it may well frighten off a prospective predatory relative. Now, we all have predatory relatives, and I have made every effort to forestall any claims by predatory relatives by making testamentary statements as to why I'm doing this and why I'm not doing this. Now, I can't guarantee success, but at least it will frighten off the more spurious actions.
So we've talked a lot about people we don't like in our wills just now. is how do we balance taking care of the people we love in our estate, but also taking care of our passions or what we want to leave a legacy for?
Everybody's different. You know, I can't answer that question, Carolyn.
Okay.
Do what you like.
All right.
Yeah, I've thought a little bit about this. I don't think it's a matter of choosing one or the other. I think you can balance the needs of your family with making a bequest. So I think it's probably, it'll depend on everyone's individual circumstances, your family's circumstances, but I think it's probably a matter of, understanding what your estate is going to comprise of when you do pass away. Giving some thought then to, who are your beneficiaries, what are the circumstances of your family, are they stable financially, what sort of need might they need. I think once you have an idea of what sort of provision you need to make for your family to ensure that they have that security, I think you can then, from there, work out, okay, well, if I leave a bequest of a percentage of my estate, is that going to detriment my family financially or affect them at all? And I think, the point is maybe if you're leaving 50% or 100% of your estate, you might, that might impact them. But if something like 5%, well, I would argue, well, that bequest is going to make a lasting impact on the chosen charity, and it shouldn't have a financial detriment there for your family because they're still receiving the other 95%. So I think it is possible to balance both needs and achieve those two objectives.
Thank you, Nathan. Do you agree with that, Brett?
I certainly do. Yeah, some really good comments there, and I think if I was to add to that, again, I see a lot of my clients go through retirement, and this is an issue, a society issue, that we don't tend to spend a lot of our money in retirement. The government wants you to spend a lot of money in retirement, but because of the way the law is when it comes to superannuation, they only require you to take a fairly small amount of money out of your superannuation every year in retirement. So once you get to 65, if you're in pension phase, you have to take 5% of the account balance. And when you get to 75, it goes up to 6%, and that percentage goes up as you get older. But recently we've had really strong investment markets. So I was just looking today, the US stock market has returned nearly 90% over the last 5 years. So that's an average of about 18% every year. So if you think about, I have to take out 5%, but if I'm generating a return of 7, 8, 9, 10%, well, your capital's just going up over time. So a lot of my clients are actually getting to death with a lot of money left that they then distribute to whoever. And I agree with Nathan's comments there that if you give 95% to your family, children, or whoever, and 5% to charity, that's not going to make a big difference to the beneficiaries because they've got 95% of the inheritance. So no, that was well put there, Nathan. I think that was a very, very, very good point to make.
And if someone's dealing with a financial planner or their accountant and their legal advisors, their business advisors, and they have a very good understanding of their wealth and what they need and what they can distribute, what do you think about them basically enjoying that and how getting the enjoyment of giving during their lifetime instead of just waiting until they die and then there's just so much money there to do whatever?
Yeah, this is something I talk to my clients about a lot because, as I said, I spoke to a client yesterday. I mentioned it to Nathan that the amount of money that she has, she's not going to make a dent on the capital between now and date of death because the amount she's got, the earnings that are going to be generated are going to give her more than the income that she needs on a yearly basis. So her kids, she's got 3 kids, so potentially her 3 kids, and I don't know anything about her kids. But I'm assuming that she's wanting her money to go to her 3 kids. They're going to get a very big inheritance, and again, it's about thinking about what sort of position are the kids in as well. So if they're well set up, and you think, well, okay, this money would be nice to go to them, but is it going to change their life as well? again, bring it back to, well, if I divert 5% or 10% or whatever the amount is to a charity organisation, and the flow-on effects of that for many, many people is incredible. And I've seen a bit of that here in Bendigo myself. Since I've been here, I've lived here for 8 years now, and as Carolyn mentioned, I've seen the good work that the arts community do here in Bendigo, and it's something that my son has enjoyed over that time, and I've seen people's lives be changed by the programs that we have here in Bendigo, young people's lives, and Howard mentioned this a little before, that some people, you might not be able to influence what their future looks like, but I've seen it firsthand that some of the kids that my son has performed with, their lives have been transformed by being involved in the arts world here. And I sometimes talk to people about, the amount of money the arts get is nothing compared to the sports programs here in Australia. Imagine if a small percentage of what we devote to the sporting professionals could come to the arts. Our life would be much richer. That's my view. But unfortunately,
Like that view.
so it's it's about for me, I talk to my clients about giving something that you're going to see, because as Howard said, when you're 10 foot under, you're not going to see the benefit of your gift. So it's important to really have a look at what you do while you're alive.
Great words. So if someone's been inspired to make a bequest, what's the very first thing or first step that they should take, the practical thing? So they've decided on their charity or what they want to do with that bequest. What's the first thing that they should do? And it's an open question.
Well, you really ask, should you notify the recipient? My answer is no, they'll have an idea, but you don't want to have them making decisions dependent on your gift and therefore on your death. So, the Legion of Mary or whatever else, the cell phones, but they're still in operation, the cell phones, although they've been Americanised, I noticed. They don't have op shops now, they have thrift shops, and all of that is calculated. That's a charity I would not give a shell to.
So you don't think that people should know that you're going to make a bequest for them?
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think they do. An expectation, and you've got to be very careful about this with your own families. You cannot use the fact of giving out as a mechanism of getting what you want from members of the family. I've not told any of my members of my family what proportion of what percentages that they're going to get.
That'll come as a nice surprise.
I can't afford to travel first class, but I strongly suspect it'll be a flotilla of my relatives flying around the world.
So apart from telling the bequestee, the charity that you've made a bequest for them, you might not tell them how much or whatever, but the percentage. In terms of the legal and financial aspects of it, what's a step? What should they be doing? Practical things, say if they're going to meet with their legal representative.
Yeah, so with any estate planning matter, we try and make it a pretty painless process. So there's not a lot of preparation or extensive work that the client needs to do beforehand. In that first meeting, we're really finding out a bit more about the client, about their family situation, their beneficiaries, whether or not there's any beneficiaries who, for example, might have special needs, disability, addiction. So just trying to get a holistic picture of what their situation is, and then we pivot towards talking about their assets. So what do they own? Have they got superannuation? information. How do they own those assets? Is there trusts? Is there companies, businesses that we need to consider? A lot of the times we'll link in with the financial planner or the accountant to confirm that information as well. So once I've got a good understanding of the family situation, the asset structure, we then turn towards, well, what do they want to accomplish out of that estate plan? So who are their beneficiaries? Are there any bequests that they're wanting to make? We're looking at, well, if there are bequests, what's going to fall into the estate when they do pass away? Who are their executors going to be? So we try and make it a fairly easy process from that first meeting all the way up to them executing those estate planning documents. What I find really good is if the client comes in and they have a sense of what they want to accomplish, how they want to see their estate distributed. It can be difficult when the client comes in and they don't have any idea what they want to achieve, and they, I guess, look towards you to try and give them that answer, and you have to say, look, it's your family, it's your assets, you need to probably go away and think a little bit about, well, what do you want to accomplish out of this process? So I think that's probably the main thing, is the client just needs to have a bit of an idea of where they want to get to at the end of that process, and we can sort of help guide them through that.